Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You are the last of the candidates to go through this process, and I know that being a candidate in a local race is hard work, and I respect you all, and it's just great to see. I guess we got 10 people in the race,
Yes, we do.
so it's not like there's indifference in our county.
Exactly.
But I've started this with every candidate, and I always think it's helpful for everybody because this might be the first time people actually get to see you in person.
Very true.
And I guess, it's always the journey. How did you get to the Eastern Shore is the easy question,
The
except if
journey.
you're born here.
Well, no, I wasn't born here, but one of the highest compliments I've ever been paid is from my old boss, Hugh Grundon at Easton Utilities, and he used to say to me all the time, "I always forget you're not from here." And coming from here, I consider that a compliment.
That's right.
But no, I'm originally from New York, but came here via Washington D.C. I went from New York to L.A. to Washington D.C.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I'm sort of bi-coastal, but I grew up in a small town on Long Island called Oyster Bay, the home of Billy Joel. That's our claim to fame. And I am first-generation American. My father was an Irishman who emigrated here in 1948
Oh, for heaven's sake.
and married my mother in 1952.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So, yeah.
And then work brought you to the shore?
Work brought me to the shore. It did. I was in the hotel business for about 20 years before I moved here. And I came here to be the marketing director for the Tidewater Inn in 1988.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes, so that was my first foray into the Eastern Shore. And I have to say, when I first pulled up to Easton for my job interview, I thought it looked a whole lot like Oyster Bay, and I felt very much at home.
Yeah.
So,
But you must have sensed the potential here. I mean, 89 was almost 90 was kind of an important kind of transition year, I thought.
it was. It was. I would have to agree with that. I found I was coming from Capitol Hill, so just the change in the pace, if you will, was a little startling for me. But still being in the same industry, a hotel is a hotel, no matter where you are and how big or how small you are, because it's a living, breathing thing that's open 24/7, 365. So
Right.
there's still a lot of work to be done. So
And so with the Tidewater, you got a sense of local issues?
oh, absolutely. It sort of I dove into the local culture immediately because I wanted to get to know my peers, and of course I wanted to work closely with the local community to help promote the Tidewater because that was my job. So I got very involved with the business community, especially the downtown merchants. George Murphy was our mayor back then,
Right.
and he was a great advocate of the Tidewater. He was a great advocate for the downtown business community.
Yeah.
So yeah, we worked on things way back then about staying open after 5 o'clock and doing some promotions. So almost immediately I became immersed in the business community in Easton and Talbot County.
And you've held office before.
I have.
Yeah.
I have. I was elected twice to the Easton Town Council in the early 2000s, and then in 2008, Mayor Willey named me the Economic Development Director for the town. But prior to that, after I left the Tidewater, I went to the Chamber of Commerce and was the Tourism Director for Talbot County.
Oh.
And then Mayor Murphy asked me to start the Main Street program in the mid-90s for Easton, so I was the Main Street manager. Then I went to work for Easton Utilities as their corporate communications director, and then I ran for office, and then I served as the economic development director for 5 years before I retired in 2014.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, so this has been my hub, my home, my passion for a very long time, and I love this community.
Yeah, so loving a community, I do that too.
Uh-huh.
But running for office, I don't do.
Yeah, that's in my
so
blood.
I'm always kind of curious, when you decide to to take this on, and what motivates you? Was there a key issue, particularly as we talk about county council, that really struck a chord and you felt like I have to get back into it?
Well, let me go back a little bit further, where I decided to run for office the first time. And it was something that Mayor Murphy had said to me when I was Main Street manager. He said, you know, you really have a passion for this. You really should run for office someday. And I said, well, you know, Mayor, maybe I will. And that always stuck with me. And then when Mayor Murphy passed, I was sort of saddened, you know, by the fact that I hadn't run for office yet. But there were so many issues back then that I was passionate about. And it was mostly the redevelopment of downtown Easton, you know, infill. I was worried about sprawl. I was worried about, you know, infrastructure not being taken care of properly before we build. And I think a lot of those same things had transferred my feelings for wanting to run for the county council as well. Because if there's one thing I've learned over the 30 years that I have been here, it's that what we have is very special. And I've traveled all over this country, and I have never seen an area like this that has so much beauty, so much charm, so many wonderful arts, and in proximity to so many wonderful cities.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just think about our location itself. You know, you can get in the car and drive to Washington, you know, for the day, and you know, that's or Baltimore or Philly, or even, you know, 2 days in New York. It's just it's exceptional, and yet we have the raw beauty and nature here that needs to be protected. And I think that's probably the number one reason that I have run for county council, because I would like to see us stay the same, but yet I understand the need to grow. So having been a professional economic developer, I understand the balance. You know, and my idea of economic development is not big box stores, and I imagine most of my peers would say the same. But it is bringing good jobs so that our kids can come back home after college and raise their kids here, because we don't want to become a retirement community.
But, you know, when you talk about economic development, this is one of the issues that's come up recently, where the expansion of sewer into the Bay 100 brought in enormous amount of anxiety.
Yes.
That this was opening the door for development that would have tremendous harm on those communities.
Right.
How did you track that issue, and what's your point of view?
Dave, it's all about balance, in my opinion, because, you know, you can talk to the people in Bay 100 and they'll tell you they need more people living out that way to support their businesses and to work in their businesses. And, you know, you'll talk to people that work in Talbot County that can't afford to live here. So they're traveling in because they're buying their homes in Caroline or Dorchester, because they can't afford to buy a home here. So the balance, you know, and this is just one example, the balance for me would be take a limited and managed growth is one of my favorite terms, because just because you put a sewer line in doesn't mean that, you know, you should be able to pop up 1,000 homes. But is there room out in the Bay 100 area for some growth? Absolutely. So because they need that growth to stay healthy. I mean, we want to keep Tillman Elementary open. We'd like to have a bank back there. I mean, there are things out, you know, there's Harrison's has reopened into a lovely hotel. There's another hotel reopening. The Tillman Island Inn, I believe, has been sold and is reopening again next year, hopefully. So, I mean, people need to live, work, and play in a decent proximity so that we don't have people on the road all the time. But I fully believe in managed growth. In other words, yes, water and sewer would be a positive for the Bay, which is another, you know, everybody out there on wells is not helping the Bay any at all. So, but I do think, again, that we don't need to plop up 1,000 homes between, you know, McDaniel and Tillman.
Yeah. And then, you know, on the zoning front, again, we were hit by these short-term rental issues. and just wanted to get your point of view on that.
Well, it's interesting. As the former director of tourism for the county, I understand the value of the short-term rental market. I was in shock when I saw the map that showed just how many, the map at the public hearing with the pins on it. Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay. When I saw that and saw just the sheer number of short-term rentals that we have in Talbot County, I said it's time to reevaluate this situation. Because I have heard from many, many constituents that are unhappy with the fact that their neighbor is not really their neighbor. Their neighbor changes every week because they live next door to a short-term rental. It can be extremely disruptive, and we need to get a handle on it. We really do.
And would you take other measures beyond what the Talbot Council has approved or kind of
I'm encouraged.
reinforced by their...
Right. I'm encouraged by what they have done so far. I would, and I don't agree with everything that they have done. I would like to see the enforcement piece a little more fleshed out. Just by hiring a part-time, code enforcement person is not really going to solve this issue, I don't think. We need to do it on the front end. And I would be in favor of a moratorium right now until we can reevaluate this. And I'm not sure whether they voted on that or not. To be honest with you, I'll have to look. But we need to get a handle on it. So, as I said earlier, and there needs to be some regulations. And some of the regulations that I read seem to be a little onerous, with as far as the site plan for the house, and the privacy screening outside. I mean, it's really a question of how many we should permit, where they should be, and how often they should be able to rent them. And is it being managed properly? Is it a homeowner that's in residence that is renting out part of their home, or is it an investment, for someone who lives elsewhere and doesn't really have a stake in our community, and they're just sort of making money because they have this home in Talbot County?
Yeah, fair enough. So, switching channels a little bit,
Okay.
I was struck and moved really by the challenges that our school districts face with this complicated formula of maintenance of effort.
Right.
And the need in most cases to supplement that
Yes.
out of these county budgets that can ill afford it. Some counties are willing to invest more, others just simply don't believe they have the money to do that.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of concern about whether we have the right model with the maintenance effort. There's a major commission that's been started, the Kerwin
Right.
Study Group.
Right.
That's coming out with their report soon. What's your take on it as
Well-
somebody who watches this?
My take on it is that I agree. The MOE is not working for us right now. So we do need to look at it. And I'll be very curious to see what the Kerwin study shows. However, I am committed, and that is number one on my list, quite frankly, of fully funding our schools, okay, and making them safe and smart, okay, because we're nothing if we don't take care of our children. And I am firmly in belief of that. Now, I would like to get a little more into the Kerwin study and meet with those folks to find out what it is that they came up with before I make some recommendations, quite frankly. But it is something that is front and center on my agenda.
But there is a revenue challenge, particularly in this county.
Of course.
And there has been efforts in terms of this cap situation. Was that something that you were in favor of?
I was,
Yeah.
and I still am, yes. I think I'm very proud of the council for standing up in an election year to adjust that tax cap, because it was a gutsy move, but it was long overdue, quite frankly. We've been talking about this for years, And I don't think we would find ourselves in quite the hole or this negative situation that we're in if we had dealt with this instead of kicking the can down the road for the last 10 years. So that's a little frustrating for me.
Switching channels again, we have a big birthday in Talbot County. Frederick Douglass has turned 200.
See that grin on my face?
Yeah, no. I mean, every time I mention that name, I think of that Frederick Douglass Memorial, the statue going up. I've never seen a healthier, more, united moment.
Yes.
And
that was, people ask me what was the highlight of my career. I would have to say working hand in hand with the county and creating the 300th anniversary for the Town of Easton and bringing Frederick Douglass home to the courthouse lawn. I was very involved with that with our former tourism director, Debbie Dodson, who retired. And it was, without a doubt, the most rewarding thing I have done in my career in Talbot County in 30 years. And you're right, it was a spectacular day, weekend, and we continue to celebrate, and it's exciting. It's exciting that we finally have Frederick Douglass in the place of honor that he deserves.
But it's also a time, I think, as he would want us to do, is to take stock in where we are in terms of race relations and diversity. And just 2 years later, we had to deal with the Talbot boys. Maybe it was 4 years later.
Right.
Controversy, which, if I could gauge the national conversation on this, I don't think we're done with that particular issue.
I believe you're right. Dave. I think it does require more conversation and more. And I know I ruffled some feathers a couple of months ago when I said, I would like to open the conversation again because I think it's important. And I don't want to split hairs and say one's taller, one's not, but maybe there is a better place for the Talbot Boys statue other than the courthouse lawn. I don't know. If I am elected to the county council, I will absolutely make it a priority to reopen that discussion.
But as you look at our race relations in general, and you look at this phenomenally different county than when you arrived in 1989.
Yeah.
I mean, 30% of our kids are speaking, a different language, as a primary language.
Exactly.
So, are we getting better? Are there things that you feel like we could do as a county to be more welcoming?
Oh yes, I do. It's interesting. One of the things that I proposed is that I see the county council is looking for like a public information officer to work in the county government, and as a part-time position. And I made the suggestion to up that to a full-time position and make it sort of a not just public information, but sort of a welcome office, if you will, for minorities moving into the community, because I think we could definitely serve two purposes there. We have a huge, as you said, influx of non-English speaking people to our community, and all you have to do is walk down the street. And in my neighborhood, we are so racially and mixed that I love it. I mean, because I'm a New Yorker, and that's what I'm used to, and I think I love to see the ethnicity, and I love to see the what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my goodness.
The melting pot?
Oh, well, there you go. We have our own little melting pot here. But our diversity should be a strength and not a cause for tension. But we need to embrace all cultures, and I'm a firm believer of that. Obviously, as the daughter of an immigrant, that's going to be very close to my heart.
Yeah.
So
I want to come back to economic development, because I know I mentioned this in a couple of interviews, and it'd be helpful given your tourism background.
Sure.
Did you approve of the idea of economic development and tourism being combined into one office?
I don't necessarily think it's the best idea. I think, although Cassandra's doing a great job, I mean, they are definitely closely related. However, having been a tourism director and having been an economic development director, the path is very different. And it's a lot to ask one person to take on. Now they did give Cassandra some staff, which of course, helps tremendously. So I'd like to take a look at it a little more closely before I make a decision. Looking from the outside in, when they first did it, I went, ooh, man, that's a lot for one person. And because it's so critical. There's so many intricacies with economic development as it relates to funding and grants and working with the state and working with the federal government. Just that in unto itself is a different animal from tourism promotion. So, and I'm not saying, there's a lot of counties that do it. So it's not highly unusual. But again, I think Cassandra's done a great job. And they're doing great things. And I just want to make sure that they're focused. I know they lost a staff person, and so hopefully they'll get that position filled and keep moving forward.
So one of the things that I've asked all candidates is basically what do you bring to the table? What is the differential that makes your candidacy stand out that you want the voters to know?
Well, I think the number one thing that makes me stand out is my experience. My experience in this community is unparalleled, and having served in the private sector and the public sector, I'm only one of three that has served that are running for the first time, that have served in an elected capacity before. And there's a huge learning curve with that. I remember when I first got elected that I did a lot of reading. And that's one of the things, it's a tremendous amount of reading, because you have to catch up on everything from the comp plan to zoning laws to, and I've done that. I will do it again if I'm elected for the county. And I also bring the experience of tourism and economic development under my belt, if you will. And I've also served this community on a basis of volunteering time, everything from hospice to, I've been a Rotary Club member since 1997. I served on the Waterfowl Festival board. I've served the Girl Scouts of the Chesapeake Bay. I have done a great deal of service for Talbot County already in my 30 years of being here. I'm very proud of my record. I have a commitment to this community. I live here, I love it, and I want to stay, and I want to serve Talbot County.
This is, give everybody also a little time at the end. If I had forgotten an issue, or if there's something that you want us to just make sure everybody knows about your candidacy or your positions, this would be the time to speak.
Well, I think the one thing I would like people to know about me is the breadth and the depth of my experience, and I've shared that with you so far. So I am absolutely committed to Talbot County as a community, and I think I've proven over the last 30 years that I am very much a team player. And I've just been endorsed, by the way, by Peter Francho. And the reason Peter endorsed me was because I have the ability, like he does, to work across the aisle. And I've done that my entire career, and in both the public and private sector. So that's probably the one thing I would like everyone to know about me, is that I am willing to listen to all sides to do what's best for the greater good.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Appreciate the time.